I'm currently at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and I'm the interim dean in the business school.
You've written articles and they've been published in various journals. Were you the bookworm? Were you studious? Because you've done your master's and then your PhD. How did sports fit in? Hello, Professor Vibhas Madan.
Hi,
Delighted.
Joby, how are you?
Good, good. Delighted to see you on this show. Warm welcome to Kahani's Golden Bytes, our channel on YouTube. Thank you very much for taking out your time, Professor.
Thank you, Joby. Of course, my pleasure. Absolutely. So happy to be here. So.
Thank you, Professor. So Vibhas, for the benefit of our viewers, could you just give a brief background about what you're doing currently?
Sure, Joby. Be happy to do that. So, I'm currently at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and I'm the interim dean in the business school in Philly. And so I'm overseeing the business school and working with the rest of the deans of the university leadership. And I'm also a professor in economics in the School of Economics faculty. And, of course, my area of research has been international trade. But as you can imagine, lately, my time is pretty much taken up mostly with administrative responsibility. So very briefly, that's what I'm doing. And for a little bit of history as well, I ended up doing a PhD in economics at Michigan State, and I came to Drexel, and it's pretty much been kind of my focus. So this has been the place I've been.
So after your PhD, this is where you joined Drexel?
Exactly right. So after my PhD, I was looking for a research university for personal reasons on the East Coast in the US. And I was looking in an area where I was beginning a family here with my wife. So we were looking to be on this part of the country. So I came right here, right after Michigan State, East Lansing. So
lovely, lovely. So Professor, you've written articles and they've been published in various journals on business, research, economics across the world. And your works are so varied in terms of, trade agreements you've covered multinationals, vertical trade, trade agreements. You've presented papers in various places, and transfer pricing, that's something that you've written about, in quite a few places. And Vibhas, with that kind of academic brilliance behind you, with you, what is your take, if I may just ask you to very generally, paint a brush, Vibhas, is that how is a professor's role different from that in the US? And say, you've studied in Delhi University, so how is it kind of different? Is it, is it pretty similar, or is it quite different?
That's an interesting observation you're making in terms of, is there a difference? I'm not sure I would say there's a real difference in the role of a professor, especially if you're thinking about, just like in India, you have certain faculty who focus mainly on teaching, and others focus on teaching and research as well. So it's a similar kind of thing here. And I guess the other factor becomes, interactions with students and things. So I think one thing you will find is that in the faculty here, you'll find interaction with many different levels of students. Typically in India, your faculty are teaching just undergraduates or in graduate school. So that is one thing which is pretty different. So I would say the little less of a distance between the student and the faculty member here. We all know that. It's also just a traditional thing as well. But I think that's one thing I will say is different. I do find that at times the proximity of faculty and students is much more here in terms of just interactions. So that's one thing I would say. That's a simple thing which comes to mind.
And Vibhas, given the topics that you've written and your works that are published, I'm pretty sure that various governments are also following a lot of things that you're writing on transfer pricing, on trade agreements, etc. by any chance, do you interact with the local bodies there in the US on these lines?
No, that's I'll say that that's very kind of you to say that in terms of the work being looked at by lots and lots of governments and policymakers. A lot of this is indirect. So my work, just to tell you, is mainly theoretical. So I'm looking at policy implications, but in terms of actually being in a kind of policy making environment, I'm not directly involved with those kinds of things. So I'm looking mainly at policies and what are the implications and how should policies actually be retooled, so to speak, especially when it comes to taxation of multinational companies. And what are the things which the government is doing which has some unintended consequences? So these are kinds of things I'm really involved with. I do have interactions, of course, at times with local policymakers at the Federal Reserve Bank and so on, but I would not go to the extent of saying I'm impacting policy directly in any way. I think very few academics end up in that particular arena where they are having direct, immediate impact. A lot of the impact is pretty indirect. So
yeah, they continue to follow what you are writing, like the other professors in that area. Vibhas, your academic brilliance, as I've mentioned before, comes through. Were you, if I may just take the liberty, go back a few decades to your school days, Vibhas?
sure.
Were you the bookworm? Were you studious? Because you've done your master's and then your PhD. Were you always walking around with a book, Vibhas?
Not at all. And I would say, in fact, my parents were really worried. I was like out in the morning on the field playing soccer. Then once we got into organized sports, cricket in the neighborhood, and then at school, it was track and field training with Mr. Sebastian, our coach, and then it was tennis in the afternoon. And so books were really not in the middle of the mix for me too much. And so I have to tell you, it evolved later on as I got into the college days and what do I want to do. And so I did come from a family of academics, so I had books around me, so to speak. But it was not something I was not the guy walking around with your book, sitting in the lunch break, figuring out what's going to happen in the physics class after lunch. That was not me.
So Vibhas, you come from the background, like you mentioned, family background of academics. With that, how did you manage? How did sports fit in? You mentioned football, athletics, and school. In school days, you were just not playing around. You were in athletics. Yes, you also won the individual championship in your category, triple jump, javelin. So you broke records. Now that is not just playing around, kicking the ball around, hopscotch or something like that, but you were playing, you were competing and winning and breaking records. So how did you manage all of that with an environment in the school days, with the academic environment that your family, you were from?
So, it's, I will say, and my dad appreciates it. He is completely clueless when it comes to athletics. So he had no idea. My mom, on the other hand, believe it or not, had a bit of a background. My mom played basketball for her college in her younger days in Lucknow. She went to Isabella Thoburn College, and she was actually a basketball player. So I had a little bit of that in my blood, where there was some ability to play a little bit. But then, we got into playing sports and just the love of the competition, the idea of achieving goals. And some of these things which were there in the academic environment, discipline, learning, and sports just kind of fit into my scheme of things from that particular perspective, So it was really something that had some natural abilities, I suppose, but then just the joy of the competition and achievement and goals which you could get out of sports kind of combined to kind of make me really focus on that. And that's still the same to this day. I mean, for me, sports are something which are fundamentally kind of joy. The question was just joy. Really.
Lovely. So Vibhas, after school, did you play in college, or you just gave it up and was that it in college?
No, I've continued. So what happened was back in school, I was actually doing too many different things. Track and field, as you mentioned, there was tennis and table tennis, and also dabbled a little bit on the cricket team for a little bit. But once I got to college, then it's like you have to read now. Studies are becoming important. Start thinking about what comes next. So I narrowed everything down and I focused just on tennis. So I went to Hindu College
Okay.
in Delhi University, and I played on the tennis team there.
Okay.
And so I just focused on that, and on the side kept up with running purely recreationally. So nothing, no competition in track and field, but kept running. In fact, so that was it. So focused on tennis. I have to tell you a funny little story also. But when I used to play tennis in Hindu College, so all of the athletics teams, we would all go for training together. The track and field, the cricket, and all those guys. And our tennis coach and our athletic director, Mr. Datta, used to actually make me run and take the lead. And the other guys would be cursing me afterwards, like, why the hell does he have you run in front? You're just dead after our run. So although I gave up running competitively, I used to kind of run and train with those guys as well. So,
wow. Yeah, absolutely. If you had, school records competing, I wouldn't be surprised to have heard that. Wow, that was just lovely to hear. And Vibhas, so after that, you played tennis for college, so inter college, Delhi University. So you were a great sportsman. A great sportsman just comes out, and then you began to concentrate on academics. And you did your masters here in Delhi.
Yes, I went to Delhi School of Economics
School.
after Hindu College, and so that's what I did. And then I went to Michigan State University in East Lansing to do my PhD. So, but the sports kind of continued along the way. Of course, not competitively after undergrad, but so.
So Vibhas, if I may just ask you to, may pick your brains a little bit in the sense that there's a certain category of students who have played a lot, played for fun, enjoyed it, and at a time when they think of wanting to study and want a desire kicking in, for some of them there's self-doubt that kicks in, and it could be because of the feeling that I'm a sportsman, I played too much, I've never done well, or mostly don't do well in academics. I probably can't study. What would be your take or your words to that category of students who've played a lot but would want to now shift to include academics in some form or manner, maybe even seriously? You've done so brilliantly well in sports, various sports, and you've done academically exceptionally well. So any bit of encouragement or advice or views on that, Vibhas?
Sure, Joby. For me, I think about it, not in a kind of a deliberate way, but just in reflecting on basically what is the connection and the idea of things you do in sport and how it translates into the world of, academics and other achievements. And there's some very direct things. We think of sports, we think about discipline, and, academics is about discipline, the discipline of the mind, so basically in sports, as you know yourself, you as well, having been an athlete, that you have to stay focused on a goal, and that's academics. And sometimes you don't understand things. Same thing with sports. I don't know exactly how to hit this particular shot, and I've got to figure this out. Same thing as trying to solve a problem in studying mathematics or economics. I can't figure this model out. I got to be more disciplined. So, and this structure, right, when you study. So similarly in sports, there are rules, there are a kind of a competition, there's structure which translates. And then the other thing I think about also is resilience. I always felt that comes back to the same thing. And things don't go, you don't always ace that exam. You don't always, get the problem right. Similarly, you don't win every match, but you come back. So there's so much from the world of sports which translates into other aspects in life and academics. So I think the idea that, you just played and so you can't be too good at academics, I think actually it's the opposite. People who have played a lot also have a certain edge in terms of being able to translate some of those experiences into successful academic kind of a career. But I will say one thing, you cannot always be doing everything. So there's a time management element, which has to come into play. And that's what also as a kid playing sports taught you, right? You're like, have to go to class, you got to go back home, you got to do that homework, you got to go to practice. So think about it, like now you're growing up in this environment. So Joby, I think it's not a either or kind of thing. It's really a very, very complementary thing in a kind of a deep sort of way from my perspective anyway. So.
Thank you, Vibhas. Thank you for that. And Vibhas, you mentioned that you still play sports. How do you manage that?
Well, I have to. If I didn't play sports, I'd go crazy. So I have to figure it out. So I do. So I continue to play tennis in competitive leagues. Nothing too much. So we have in the U.S. You of course have the U.S. Tennis Association has a very nice kind of a structure where they enable a lot of competition. You can play with players of all different levels and different categories. So I play tennis pretty regularly. But the thing which I've picked up, one of the biggest bugs around here is golf. So I have to tell you that that's a game which I picked up later in life, and it is just an incredible sport. And I'm a big fan of the game of golf. But I also have to tell you one thing. It's one of the more difficult games I've played, and it's the only game in which the ball actually just sits still. Just think about that. So in terms of mental focus challenge, it's your own self. So I still continue, Joey. And, so it's something which I cannot see myself giving this up as long as I'm able. So,
Vibhas, wonderful to hear all of this. Vibhas, I want to, not impinge further on your time. I want to thank you for taking your time from your precious work. I know, with the time zones, etc., included. I want to thank you for taking your time, sharing your views and your advice. A lot of our viewers of this channel are really going to benefit from this, from what you've shared for a long time. Vibhas, thank you very much.
oh, Jovi, it's such a pleasure, really pleasure to speak with you about this. And anytime, there's so many things we think about in this world, and these are the kinds of things which we must talk about, must share with the other generations, and just continue to kind of talk about the importance of kind of a holistic way of doing these things. So thank you, Joby. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vibhas.
Thanks.